When passion collides with purpose, and when God's mission crystallizes into a personal mandate, this is what you have. Last in Line podcast. I'd rather so much more people be authentic than fake. Fake floats. Fake's like that gross, crusty surface that floats to the top that nobody wants to consume. We might be a little too honest here. But I appreciate podcast hosts who are in the boat with me. We don't have it all figured out. If you can't serve, you can't lead. We built this podcast on Mark 9:35, where Jesus says, in order to be first, you will be last of all and servant of all. Gentlemen, you're in the right place. Welcome to Last in Line podcast. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Sathiya Sam, who I consider as the guru of porn addiction, porn healing and coaching, porn murdering, hopefully, if we could get rid of it in its entirety. Not sure that's going to happen, but he himself battled with this addiction for 15 years. He is an author. He's a speaker. Of course, he's an international speaker and a podcast host of a podcast called Man Within. He wrote a book called The Last Relapse. He is the founder of Deep Clean Coaching, which has helped over 1,000 men quit pornography and rebuild their lives of integrity. We talk a lot about, I break it down into three categories. I went from science to symptoms to solution. Symptoms being the addiction, which is a symptom of a greater, deeper rooted issue, I believe. And so all addictions, specifically, we're going to talk about pornography. I don't think I've brought anybody on here to talk about. I take that back. I had Joshua Broom on, who was a porn star, so you don't get much more directly involved than that. But Sathiya, I've been really kind of searching to get on here for a couple years and lost track of him and got reintroduced to him thanks to Larry Hagner from the Dad Edge. And so here we are. We recorded this, and I hope you like it. I hope, if you're dealing with it or you're dealing with any kind of lust or temptation, I think all of this would apply. But we dig into his coaching pretty detailed. But I wanted to kind of get into some of the science behind it and how I kind of believe that addiction is a choice. I don't know that that's even a chemical thing where you can't shake a particular addiction to something, but that's just my opinion. Maybe science will back it up. Maybe he will, but I think you should stick around for the whole interview and share it, because I'm sure, this may be the biggest issue facing men today. So hope you enjoy my episode here with Sathiya Sam. Sathiya Sam, we finally did it, man. I feel like I should go buy a lottery ticket because we finally hit a home run with this one, man. Welcome to Last in Line podcast.
Hey, it's great to finally be here, man. Thank you for being patient with me. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, hey, we got a lot of overlap out there. We've got a lot of 6 degrees of separation between the two of us, with knowing some of the same folks, and the Ryan Micklers and the Larry Hagners of the world, and probably a lot of other ones. I'm sure you know Josh Broom and some guys like that. So cool to have you, dude. I know you mentioned you guys are really trying to get your resources out there and sort of, as we like to call it in the sales world, launching and kind of blitzing the area, canvassing the area, because there are so many people that need what you do. So I appreciate what you do. Let me be first to thank you for that on this conversation, man.
Oh, thanks, John. I appreciate that, bro. And yeah, it's funny. We're like a very I don't know how, I still don't have the right language. I was gonna say we're a product heavy organization, but it's not true. But what I mean is we really try to just do a couple products and do them super well. And so we don't do launches very often. We did like a launch, several years ago when we started. I launched a book in 2022, and we haven't had anything new for a while. We just like to optimize and refine, and if it's good, don't mess with it kind of deal. But yeah, anyways, I'm just excited to be here, and I love what you're doing. I think we need good and better messaging around leadership, especially for me, like as the organization here has grown. I've just seen the need for that, and people like you're doing a really, really good service to so many men.
I appreciate it. It's good to be just one of many, just kind of a spoke in the wheel. I mean, there's a lot of tremendous podcasts. I don't even know what the number is, but there's a lot of podcasts out there.
Yeah,
And
it's up
we've,
there.
I mean, we've kind of stayed relatively constant in our following, and it's not, there are certainly more prominent podcasts out there, but man, we're about to drop our 500th episode and
Hey,
started our
come on.
sixth season, so. I guess there
Jeez.
is something to be said for just kind of grinding in obscurity and just doing what you feel God's called you to do, and regardless of the splash you're making. And but I'm glad to have people like you here, man. It's an honor for me because you could be doing a lot of other things, and I appreciate you being here. So before 2018, when you launched the coaching and your I guess solo career with this in this space took off really and kind of hockey stick everything up to the right for you. What'd you do before? Like what was your professional by trade? Kind of what are you skilled at? What have you experienced? And kind of take us down a little bit of a professional side first.
Yeah, I mean nothing too exciting, but I grew up in a pastor's home, and so church and I would say spiritual leadership was just always kind of part of life. Went to Christian school. I mean the coaching work I do now, which is helping men with sexual issues and especially pornography use. That all started for me in the computer lab of my Christian school. You know, I was 11
Mm,
years old when I got first exposed. Um, I was very high achieving academically. And so, like a good Indian kid, really strong with the math and the sciences. And so, when I finished high school, I skipped a grade, so I graduated from high school very young. And my goal was to become a psychiatrist, in large part because I had lost a couple friends to suicide in high school. One really close friend, and then a couple others, and then unfortunately, that close friend's brother as well. So, it was just a series of tragedies that really sparked an interest in mental health. I have this really strong academia or academic skill for math and the sciences. So I went into university and I got really involved very quickly. So I was high achieving still, volunteering, and then I did lots of research. So I got over 5 figures in research grants during my undergrad. And so everything was on the right trajectory for me to go to med school, become a psychiatrist. And in working in these labs, John, I got exposed to atheism like never before. And like I said, I went to Christian school. I mean, I played sports and stuff, so it's not like I had never been exposed to this, but these were sharp. These are some of the brightest minds, on the cutting edge of science that think God doesn't exist, that think people who are stupid enough to believe in God shouldn't be in the lab, that kind of deal. And I had to really do some soul searching, like, wait a minute. These are smart people. I've learned a lot from these people. I would trust these people to some extent. Why do they think that, and why do I think so differently? And in that soul searching process, I found Christ. Like I think this is where the baton got passed from my parents, and I'm not riding the coattails of their faith, but I made a decision like I'm going
hmm
to commit my life to Jesus.
hmm
So I knew that with that decision come a couple lifestyle adjustments. I had to stop getting drunk on the weekend with my friends. I needed to clean up my language, and I had to stop watching pornography. And so this is kind of where like my coaching practice even starts because the first two were very easy. I was able to clean up my language and quit drinking like that was not a big deal. I couldn't for the life of me quit pornography. Um, Almost immediately, as soon as I gave my life to Jesus, I felt a very strong shift in my heart. And instead of wanting to be a psychiatrist and pursuing psychiatry, I still felt like I could do that. But my passions immediately shifted to ministry, all things ministry. And I started to become the thing. I told myself I'll never be like my dad and become a pastor, but that's where God was calling me to. And so for basically all my 20s, I wound up pastoring. I did ministry school, then I pastored. Um, Still while struggling with pornography, and leading worship. I released a worship album. I was doing itinerant speaking, was really like, I don't want to use
Yeah.
the wrong language here, but I was definitely gaining influence in the local church and the local areas where I was pastoring and all while still struggling with pornography. And so was on a very dangerous path of hypocrisy. And really, by God's grace, I managed to get help. I came clean to my leadership as well about my struggle, and they were very supportive. And was able to finally find freedom in 2016. That's when I had my last relapse. And I had two prayers during my recovery journey. One was, God, whoever my future wife is, keep her from me until I am
hmm
clean, until you think I'm ready for it, not until I think I'm ready, but God, until you think I'm ready. Those are two very different things. And my
hmm
second prayer was, God, if you help me figure this out for myself, I'll do everything in my power to help other guys figure it out for themselves as well. And so my last relapse was February 2016. December 2018 is when we launched Deep Clean. And since then we've helped, hundreds, thousands of guys quit pornography. So I answered more than what you asked for there, John, but just to give guys some context of kind of the career
No,
journey and the
you're
trajectory.
actually kind of reading my mind because I was thinking as the words are coming out of my mouth, I'm thinking maybe I should have gotten maybe more of a background on his faith journey first, but then you just went right there. So I appreciate you saving us
Perfect.
time already. So okay, early in your life, like, well, I say early. I mean, maybe a lot of guys first get exposed to that, to pornography of some kind in the printed form or, back in the 80s, of course, it was printed form. But
Yeah.
that might be coming at 10, 11, 12 years old, right? It could be coming earlier now. But
Yeah.
so I want to talk more about your background just a little bit, but I want to let you know too. I want to set the stage and frame this up. Like I want to go. I'm going to talk a little science, and then I'm going to talk some symptoms, and then I want to go solutions. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
big into alliteration. I'm sorry, my listeners get it. They know me. I'm a nerd, but I like it, and
I like
it
it.
came to me about 5 seconds before I logged in. So I was like, I got to use it. It came to me for a reason. But so I do have to know though, like when you wrote the book called Last Relapse, and I wonder as you're carrying this into marriage, maybe give me an idea. It could be putting the cart before the horse. I know we'll talk a little bit about that some down the road, but baggage we carry into marriage, was that something that were you married after you finally were done with porn? Or if so, then take me through what guys, how they carry that and what they do when they carry that into marriage.
So early in my 20s, I was a single man, struggling with pornography, really frustrated, talking with a mentor, and I remember telling him, "Man, I can't wait till I'm married. I'll be having sex regularly, and I won't be
Ah.
struggling with pornography." And he almost reached across the table to smack me. He was so mad, and he said, "Bro, if it's a problem now, it's going to be a bigger problem later. Marriage is a magnifier." So
Mm,
I really took that to heart. That's what actually inspired my prayer. God, whoever my future wife is, keep her from me until I'm ready. Because I really trusted this mentor, and I thought if what he's saying is true, I'm in trouble. Like I'm definitely not ready for marriage, and I'm gonna make a real mess of it. So I was fortunate enough to go into my marriage having dealt with most of it. I quit porn February 2016. I met Shaloma, my wife, November 2016. So God really answered that prayer for me in a really incredible way. It's not to say that I haven't, had to work through things while being married. Even like starting to be sexually active in my marriage was interesting because the only frame of reference I previously had was one other relationship where there was some sexual activity, and then about 15 years of watching,
yeah.
way too much pornography. And so it took me a while to really enjoy sex, to be present, to really I guess for that to be like even a bonding experience, I came in very just physically minded, trying to reenact a lot of what I had viewed, because I didn't know any better. And so it's not to say that I wasn't without the effects of it, but fortunately, I did quit pornography before
That's
I
good.
was married.
That's good because you hit on something that's important. It's not just the act of pornography and masturbation. It's not just like if you're clean of the physical, you still carry some of
Oh
the
yeah.
rooted, deep-seated, maybe mental thoughts and addictions and temptations, I guess is a better word. So no, I get that. I mean, I'm glad you touched on that. Did you have a rock bottom? Like as a single guy, I mean, it's not like you blew up your relationship necessarily. So, what was
Yeah.
rock bottom for you to get you? Like, how did you finally just like last relapse this thing? Was there a breaking point?
Yeah, I would say I had two probably. One was a little bit more major where I realized the extent of my brokenness and my
Mm,
addiction. And that was
mm,
when I was still living at home. I was early 20s. I lived in the basement. I had a bedroom in the basement. There was another bedroom that was kind of just like a spare room. But in the summers, my brother would sleep there because it was colder temperatures and whatever. But that room was also where the family computer was. And I had this weird thing where it's like I didn't really want to watch on my own devices for some reason. I felt like that was better. So I generally would watch on the family computer just at opportune times. Anyways, one night an urge really like hit me really badly, And I was like, oh, my brother's there. He's sleeping. I kind of peeked in. Yeah, he's sound asleep. I think I could sneak a quick whatever. And I kind of like wrestled with it back and forth, but ultimately I gave in. And I didn't. It's not like I got caught or anything from it, but I just thought, man, I'm this older brother. I'm supposed to be protecting him, looking out for him, being a role model to him, and I literally just put him at like major risk for my own selfish, 2 minute pleasure kind of moment. So that was a real rock bottom of me just realizing how bad this situation is. And
Mm,
then the second one, which is actually not too long before I quit pornography, and I share this story to really encourage guys because you could be in a really difficult situation. You might be in a rock bottom moment yourself, and you also may not be that far away from quitting for good.
mm,
The timeline here, this is November 2015, and I'm about to release my debut worship album. And I'm starting to kind of gain more influence as well pastoring. So I've kind of more opportunities to speak. My worship album's coming out, and I'm kind of feeling the pressure.
mhm,
And I had at this point I had actually been doing decently with pornography. I think I had maybe only watched a couple times that year. So definitely not doing perfect, but doing okay. And I had a really, really hard binge just right before the album came out. And I was so ashamed because I really felt like releasing a worship album. Like there's an expectation. There's a certain
mhm,
standard that comes with having that kind of platform. And I remember praying, and I couldn't pray the same like, oh God, I feel so bad, forgive me, I'm not going to do this again. Like it was just like, man, I've been doing this for like 12 years. Like I can't pray this prayer another time. And so I just said, God, what do you want me to do? Like I'm here. We both know what I just did. What do you want me to do? And very quickly, I heard something that I did not want to hear, and that was tell your dad. And I just, it was just, there's too coincidental to be like, that must have been God. Like, it just came to my mind as soon as I said, like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Tell your
mm,
dad. So I called my dad up. And I said, Dad, he's like, hey, how's the album coming along? Like, you excited about the release? And I'm like, yes, but I actually like I have some bad news. And I told him what was going on. He was so gracious about it. I'm so grateful. And he actually encouraged me. He said, I think maybe you just need to get some help with it because, like, and he actually kind of alluded like, this has been a problem in our family. It's been a problem for me too, that
mm,
sort of thing. So I wound up launching my album and all that kind of stuff. And then afterwards, I reached out to get some help. And that actually, like I said, that was November 2015. And it was 4 months later, February 2016, that I had my last relapse.
mhm.
And so, anyways, it just goes to show like, you can have these rock bottom moments. It's not necessarily years to climb back up. God can change things pretty quickly if
Mhm.
we're willing, if we're obedient, and obviously if we have the right solutions.
Yeah. Well, and golly, when you say that about your phone call to your dad, like, I wonder how much you could have saved yourself had you just kind of, did you ever feel that nudge? Like you were pretty evident, it was pretty evident that it was God saying, tell your dad. So
Yeah.
in that 11 years or however long, did you ever have those sort of urges to be like, come clean with him or ever feel like you heard God, but just kind of ignored it? I think that's for guys because I've been tapped on the shoulder a lot and ignored it and it came
Mhm.
crashing down. So I just
Yeah.
wonder, is that something you could save guys from if you maybe heard it early on and could have saved yourself?
Yeah, well, I think we could broaden it a little bit. Like everybody's gonna have a different relationship with their dad, but
Hmm.
I would say, whoever that trusted person is,
Hmm.
that person needs to know. And for me, it started out like I started it by talking to a really close friend about it, a couple close friends. Eventually, I was plugged into a community of guys, and we were,
Hmm.
very accountable and transparent with each other. And that progression all was really valuable. I don't think I would have ever quit pornography if I hadn't had those different seasons.
Mm.
I think what was significant for me about telling my dad is number one, my dad has been my hero for more a majority of my life, and so this was really the deepest level of vulnerability because if there's anybody who could judge me or shame me, it would be my dad. And not that he was that kind of person, but what I mean is I held so much regard for his opinion
Hmm. Yeah.
that if he would have responded with some criticism or anything like that, it would have devastated me. So it was really vulnerable that way, and I think that's why his response was so healing. But the second thing, and this is a good thing for dads to hear that are listening
Hmm.
to this podcast, is my dad was transparent about his own struggle. And like
Yeah.
I said, he kind of said, like, this has actually been a problem for me too. I want you to get the help that you need because it's worth it. Um, that really gave me a lot of permission and actually de-shamed a lot of my own experience. Like, oh, I kind of thought my dad was perfect in this area. Like I said, he's my hero, so I kind of just assumed he was good to go. For him
Yep.
to admit that really gave me a lot of like, oh, so I'm not some like horribly flawed human. And okay, he went and got some help, so this is actually it felt a little bit more normal, and that was a real gift that he gave me that nobody else in the world could have. So yes, if you have that kind of relationship with your dad, or even if you don't, but you have a relationship with your dad and you know that maybe just talking to him could help, or that maybe he could even offer some insights into what exists in the family, there might be more going on than you realize, and it could be really helpful
Yeah.
for you for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Um, well, so okay, let's try to transition here. I think I may have got us. I'll have us going off on different probably rabbit trails here and there because I think this is such an organic conversation. Like I want to go where it leads, and I feel like there's just so many places. Probably can't even cover all of it right now, but um, what greater opportunity to bring you back? Maybe not 2 years from now, like we waited for this one, but
Yeah, we can make it
all
shorter
right.
next time. Yeah.
All right, so science. Let's start here. So neuroscience, you're a science guy, you're a math guy. I talk to neurologists on a daily basis. My vocation is neurology, medical sales, and so I'm fascinated by how the brain works. Who isn't, right? But
Yeah.
I guess what is that thing let's start as a young child who's first exposed to visual stimulation. Like, how do they even know they're visually stimulated by that? Like, they've never had any sort of physical or chemical feeling of whatever exhilaration comes from pornography. Okay, so they
Yeah.
see it and they're just wired to be attracted to that, let's say,
Yeah.
opposite sex, naked woman, whatever. I guess what is going on in our brains that like plants those seeds that then those just kind of grow and are fertilized by the next visual stimulus?
Yeah, I mean, our brains are wired to be stimulated. Like an
Mm,
unstimulated brain is incredibly unhealthy. I have a 2-year-old boy and then I have a 6-week-old boy.
mm.
I got two little boys. My 2-year-old is like he loves screens. It could be he likes the screen even just the display in my car. He likes pushing all the buttons. The screens are very stimulating visually. Um, Now, when you have a screen and then you have something sexual, that is a completely different degree of stimulation. And that's for two
Mm,
reasons. Number one,
mhm,
pornography in of itself is what they call a super normal stimulus because most pornography today is very manicured, it's very produced. And so the level of stimulation that it causes in your brain is unnatural. It is such an intense degree of
mm,
stimulation. It doesn't compare to even a real life sexual experience that you would experience as an adult. That level of stimulation is much lower. That's actually why a lot of young men are experiencing erectile dysfunction today. They watch so much pornography, their body's been programmed to experience this very, very high threshold of stimulation to experience arousal. And so when they're actually, in bed with a real woman, the body just doesn't react because it's programmed to experience something, perfectly manicured. And obviously we know as
mhm,
invigorating as a real life experience is, it can't necessarily match up.
mm,
The second layer to this, though, when we're talking about kids getting exposed, is that sexual stimulation is processed 20% faster in the brain than any other form of stimulation. So just think about that, John. Just think
mm.
about the most stimulating thing in the world, whether we're talking about noise or a really, some animated film or whatever it might be. As soon as that stimulation is sexual in nature, 20% faster. It registers completely differently in the brain and the body. And so, can a child be addicted to his phone? Of course. Can a child be addicted to video games? Absolutely. But in some ways, I would say he's 20% more likely to get addicted to something sexual in nature like pornography because the hardwiring happens so much faster.
Hmm.
And because we are not fully developed as men specifically until we're about 25 years old, when we're in
Mm,
a very kind of malleable state, when we're that wet concrete, that wet cement rather,
mm.
that quick stimulation is really going to hardwire you to experience things a certain way. And so that's why you can quit pornography, but you could still actually spend years before your brain and your body fully reverse those effects because the hardwiring just happens in such a critically formative stage of our life.
I mean, that is, yeah. I'm gonna learn a lot today because that's pretty powerful. That 20% faster, like that's crazy. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
When it's the sexual nature of the stimulus. Wow. Um,
Yeah. And this is
so
not,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
just one more note about that.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
not necessarily related to neuroscience, but it's an interesting thought because I know you have a
yeah.
lot of parents in your audience. They did, these are two surveys that occurred kind of side by side.
Hmm.
So the first survey was done with children 13 to 19. And what they found, they were just asking basically about their exposure to pornography and whatever. 75% of respondents had been exposed to pornography. Okay. The second group were parents. And they asked the parents basically, do you think your kids have been exposed to pornography? And 75% of parents answered no. So this conversation is so important because I think a lot of parents are probably just not aware of how readily available this content is, how, serendipitous a first exposure could be. It could be totally a freak thing, but it happens all the time. And I think that's why I'm very grateful that you're brave enough to have this conversation. Not everybody is on their podcast, but I think it's so important because a lot of parents think like my Johnny would never, because your Johnny is innocent and he's a good kid and he's probably not going out there looking for it, but it's happening at younger and younger ages because of just the level, the volume of exposure that's happening online. And
Yeah.
so, again, just all the more reason for us to pay attention to what's really happening to somebody when they do get exposed at a young age, because it's critical. It's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess parents can put all kinds of safeguards on an electronic device, of course, but I still don't know that that prevents certain pop-ups or, Bud Light commercial or whatever that's got a half naked. There's a lot of
Yeah,
other stimulus that you can't account for. So I think maybe they just assume that's not happening to little Johnny. But no, that's a great point because I mean, that's a pretty staggering statistic that 75% of the parents would answer no to that. Like, even if
yeah,
I don't have proof of it and I know where I was and we fast forward, 30 years later to technology advancements and just the depravity of the human nature, I would probably just say yes, probably
yeah,
yes, they are exposed to it. Now what they do
yes,
with that, nobody wants to admit that, but I think to your point earlier, we will never get past it and experience a breakthrough if we don't get real and right in the face of it and
yeah.
vulnerable, like you said earlier. um give me some fancy like words, dopamine and cortisol and these things because look, let's kind of shift into maybe an adult, who's got stress, a lot of stress, right? A lot of they're having the levels of cortisol are through the roof. So to counteract that, like we're searching, right? It may not
Yeah,
be porn for everybody, but we're searching for that equalizer, right? That
yeah.
thing that we feel like we deserve because we're so stressed or we're so overwhelmed. Talk to me about maybe a few of the some of the chemicals at play and how those interact.
Yeah, for sure. So, you have three chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. They all play a role in this conversation. Maybe I'll broaden it a little bit first and just talk about the four specific ways that pornography affects the brain. I think this will give some
Yeah,
context before
yeah.
we get into the
Good,
transmitters.
good.
So, the first is desensitization. And so this is where you start to build a tolerance and you need more stimulation to get the same result or the same effect. And so this is where you start to watch more intense content. You might go from softcore pornography to hardcore pornography to very niche content. This is going to sound a little bit funny, but the amount of men in our community that are heterosexual men married with kids that watch homosexual porn is much higher than you would think. And
Mm,
it's not necessarily
really?
because they are homosexual, it's because the normal stuff that they would watch eventually feels vanilla. And so they need to watch something different. And as strange as
Wow.
it might sound, that actually was interesting to them because novelty enhances pleasure. This is desensitization. The second effect is sensitization. So it sounds like the opposite, but it's actually different. Sensitization is when you have non-sexual cues and cravings that signal to your brain a desire to watch pornography. I'll give you an example. When I was young, typically most of my viewing would happen on my laptop. Even though I kind of didn't want to, but admittedly I would watch quite a bit on my laptop. So if I ever walked into my bedroom and the laptop was open on my desk, immediately my head would think pornography.
Wow.
It's non-sexual. It's not the same as seeing the pretty girl down the street. It's non-sexual, but there's cues.
Association.
It's an
Yeah.
association, exactly. So that's sensitization. Excuse me. The third effect is a reduced stress response. And so this is symptomatic of anyone that's dealing with an addiction. Your capacity for stress diminishes. You're not able to navigate stress in life nearly as effectively. And
Hmm.
then the fourth is hypofrontality. This is reduced circulation of the prefrontal cortex. So you start to lose your sense of self. You're not able to delay gratification. And in general, excuse me, sorry, John.
You're good.
Um, in general, you start to become a fraction of the person that you really are. So those four effects all are detrimental. Maybe we can start
Let,
there. Any questions
let
before I
me
get into
ask you a
the
question. Did
neurotransmitters?
you say hypofrontality or hyperfrontality?
Hypo. So
That's what I thought.
reduced activity in
Low
the frontal
version. Yeah,
lobe.
yeah. Okay, that's what I
Yeah.
thought, but I didn't. I thought I heard you say high. Okay, those. No, I'm glad you did. So start there. I mean, we could obviously dissect all of those, and there's probably multi layers to those. But so then I guess if you can do some mental gymnastics here and weave in maybe neuroplasticity, creating neural pathways, how people create these habitual avenues that they just travel on. Maybe they don't even want to. I mean, read the Bible. Paul's like, why do I do what I don't want to do? Like
Yeah.
guys have these chemical triggers that then lead to and that are, triggered by association as well, like you said. But then you get
Yeah.
into these okay, this is just what I do. I mean, this is just where my brain goes. This is just repetitive. So talk about
Yeah.
building those kind of pathways.
Yeah. Well, so here's where there's really, really good news. Number one, as you said, science would suggest that the brain is incredibly plastic regardless of age. And so we've had clients that are as old as 80 go through our program.
Mm,
Just to give you an idea of like, you can change. It doesn't matter what you've been through, how badly you messed
hmm.
up, whatever. Um, you mentioned scripture. Paul wrote in Romans the same book where he wrote, "I do the things I don't want to do, and the things
Yeah.
that I want to do, I don't do." Later on in chapter 12, he wrote that we are transformed
Yep.
by the renewing of our mind, not the
Mm,
rewiring of our brain. Now, as a
mm,
science person, I've had to really wrestle with this. Wait a minute, what's that all about? But what I've realized is, he actually hit the nail on the head. The mind actually governs the brain, not the other way around,
hmm.
unless you let it. And so I still remember one of the first clients I ever worked with. I still remember he said, anytime I see an attractive girl, I can't help but check her out. I can't help but check her out. Now, what's he saying? He's saying, I have no power. I have no freedom. I have one option. I see somebody attractive, my brain takes over, and bam, there we go. But scripture tells us that we're transformed by the renewing of our mind, which means all we need to do is if we can think superior thoughts, our brains will follow suit. The problem is we are so used to being led by our brains, by
Right.
the alerts, the notifications, the screens, the stimulation, that we just go
Mm,
wherever our brain wants to go. But you actually have a mind that allows you to exercise control and a decision in those moments. And so when we even talk about getting free from pornography, what we're really talking about is getting other options in those moments of temptation, in the moments where you have an urge, that sort of deal. So for this client, that's what it was all about. It was about giving himself other options in those moments. And that requires some decent root level work. And we can get into what that process looks like. But absolutely your brain can change. And the way your brain changes is by you thinking better thoughts. And anybody can do that any moment of any given day. You could start right now. And I always say this, if I'm ever speaking on a stage or that, like you mentioned, Larry and Ryan, they put on an event. I actually spoke at their event earlier this year.
yeah.
And one of the things I said in my opener is you are one thought away from living a radically different life. That's literally all it takes. It takes one thought because every thought is a seed and it takes root when you agree with it, it grows as you believe it, and it bears fruit when you act on it. You're one thought
Wow.
away. That's literally all you need is one thought that is true, that is deeply steeped in the truth. One thought, and that can change the entire trajectory of your brain's wiring and the behavior that's going to ensue.
Yeah. I want to talk a lot about your coaching and when we get into the solutions part because and I mean I have so many questions I'll probably end up forgetting them so I might have to just flip my outline on its head. Well, so again back to science a little bit though. Talk to me and it's a little bit of a shift but not a lot, but so I guess health and fitness, like what you're putting in your body, right? What I guess the brain's a muscle, right? I mean, so if we're either working it or we're not on the right things or the wrong things. So maybe is there a correlation? Is it relatable? Like how healthy I am to how victorious I can be in this area, or how I can train my brain a little easier if I'm putting the right stuff in and I'm exercising and I got all my, cylinders firing.
Yeah, so there's actually a much stronger link here than people realize. So number one, we know now that the greatest way to fight depression, anxiety, or pretty much any we'll call it a lower grade mental illness is through exercise. I don't know if you know that study. There's a study that showed exercise was actually 1.5 times more powerful than the world's best antidepressants. So
Hmm.
it just goes to show you, like when you take care of yourself, like your brain responds
Yeah,
appropriately.
endorphins are a real thing, right? I mean, they're pretty powerful.
They're a real thing for sure. But there's a second layer to this. So this is fascinating. I would have never guessed this in a million years when I started Deep Clean back in 2018. The number of guys that quit pornography through our program and then start to lift weights or start to run. I mean, I've lost track. We just touched base with a guy. He's been clean of pornography 2 years since he did our program. And in that time span, he has run over 2,000 miles, John. 2,000 miles. He always wanted to run an ultra marathon, never had the confidence to do it. But as soon as he quit watching pornography, he felt like, hey, if I could quit porn, I could definitely run an ultra marathon. So he started training, and this guy's literally run thousands of miles because he quit pornography. Now, how could that be? Well, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 6 that not all sins are equal, because he who sins sexually sins against his own
Body.
body,
Hmm.
right? And so when you're committing sexual sin, whether it's watching pornography or it's having affairs or it's paying for sex, you are actually sinning against your body, and that is going to affect the way you view your body. It's going to affect the way you take care of it, whether it's exercise or it's diet or something else. There was actually a study back in 2021 that showed men who viewed pornography were more likely to have eating disorders. It's a bizarre study, but if you really think about it, it makes sense. You watch all this pornography, you start to develop this body dysmorphia because you're like, oh, my body doesn't look that way. You start to get insecure, and that led to kind of the eating disorder behavior. So absolutely, this is going to have an effect on the way you view your body and the way you treat it. On the flip side, like I said, when guys quit pornography, the value for the body is restored. And in the restoration of the value of the body, guys start to make better decisions. They start to really, whether it's lifting weights, it's eating better, it's a combination of those things. We see that happen very often. Here's another layer to this, and this is something that I've really doubled down on since I started my Inner Circle program just a few months ago. This is our kind of community-based membership. Guys from around the world who are quitting pornography, and we run a weekly call, and they get a course and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of our calls, the first few months, were all centered around nightlife. Guys
Yeah.
are asking about nighttime routines, and I get tempted at night, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with arousal and whatever. How do I handle all of that? And it made me realize something, John. It made me realize that if people prioritize their sleep, they would actually dramatically reduce their struggles in this area. And there's some data to back this up, because a majority of porn viewership happens from 10 p.m. at night to midnight. And 91% of it happens on the mobile device, on the phone. So, the first piece of practical advice we give to our clients is go charge your phone outside of your bedroom. Go charge your phone outside of your
Mm.
bedroom, and you will literally, just that alone stacks the odds in your favor. But if you take it
Hmm.
a step a step further on the subject of health and wellness, if you just prioritize getting 8 hours of really quality sleep every single night, and you go to bed at a decent time, let's call it 10
Hmm.
o'clock, I can pretty much guarantee that if you do that coupled with maybe some other, root level recovery work, some of the stuff we're going to get into here, you'll see some really good results. So that, anyways, long answer, but the health and wellness conversation is very much tied into this. And I mean,
Hmm.
I've been on, Mind Pump, Dr. Axe, like some of the world's biggest fitness shows, because this subject is now people are starting to realize how much this affects people's well-being and how much more effective people are in the gym or eating well. Like all that stuff, it just gets compounded in a really positive way
Yeah.
when it's not being drained by pornography.
Well, and good point. And I think we're not afraid to talk about depression and anxiety, and because I mean, clinicians all over would admit that physical health and wellness impacts that. But when
Yeah.
we get into the realm of discomfort and uncomfortable conversations around pornography and sexual sin, I guess we haven't really leaned into that as much. But now you're saying we are, so that's great. I mean, so if I go into the symptoms, and I call addiction symptoms because I want to talk a little bit about addiction and just some of the things around it and how I view it. And I may rub some people the wrong way with some of my takes on this, and I may rub you the wrong way. I don't know. You can educate me. Maybe I'm just ignorant and I don't know what I
Let's
don't
find
know. But
out.
I can tell you, bro, look, okay. It's been, I'm going to say, since 2002 was the last time I looked at pornography.
Wow.
Okay. So, but, I have teenage boy, I have three sons and, from 19 to 26. And I know I'm not in that 75% who thinks they never saw it or did anything with it. I get it. But I'm thinking about myself back then and I'm like, I used to justify that guys are just visually stimulated. I think you mentioned that, like people in general, right? But that was
Yeah.
just my thing. So I would notice a female, I'd be with my wife and I'd be looking, like guys are not afraid to look at other chicks when they're with their wife. And then they say, oh, that's just how we're wired. Like I would never do any, whatever. Is this not is sexual addiction really an addiction, or is it a choice that manifests into a behavior that becomes repetitive that we just choose to keep doing?
Wow. That's a really layered question. I think it definitely starts as a choice. I think everybody has that choice. I think back to, when I was first exposed to pornography, I didn't have a choice necessarily. Like somebody came to me and said, "Hey, go check out this website." It was a very innocent website, but that unfortunately is still a porn site today. Otherwise, I would mention it. But you would hear it and not think it's pornography, right? So did I make a
Mm.
choice? Yeah. Like I'm not really going to go down that path for that. But every moment after that, I made a decision to watch pornography. And to go back to the conversation before, we were talking a little bit about freedom. I think freedom ultimately is having options. And so I think if you don't believe that you can create new options for yourself, then you end up living as a victim. So that's where I do agree that it is ultimately a choice. Ultimately, you're choosing to do it. I think where that messaging sometimes can be unhelpful for people is the implication then is, well, just choose something different, like just stop. And there is a contingent of people listening right now where that advice is all they need. They just need to hear the four effects that it has on the brain, and they can stop. They can actually make that choice. I would say those are the people to go with the root analogy. This is kind of core messaging for what we do here at Deep Clean. If you run over a weed with a lawnmower, everything looks clean for a little bit, right? Until the weed grows back. As long as the roots are there, the weed will grow back. And so if you really want to get rid of it long term, you uproot it. And I
Mhm.
would say the level of solution you need is generally dependent on the depth of the root. For somebody who has shallow roots, they watch pornography occasionally, it doesn't really affect them. They're not using it to cope with stress. They don't use it as a source of connection or comfort. Yeah, those people, they probably could just make a decision today and stop. I would argue that a majority of men today do not view pornography at a shallow root level. Most men who are like, you're very fortunate because you quit before broadband internet really became mainstream and
Yep.
certainly before the smartphone. But
Right.
for people that have been viewing pornography in our day and age today, with all the technology advancements, the increase in production value, even of the content itself, those roots
Availability.
have got, yeah, those roots
That's
have
right.
gotten very, very, very deep. And so I don't think it's as simple as you make a better choice. I think still maybe there's a small percentage of people that it is. I think for most, it's not just saying I need to choose something better. It's understanding why do I keep making this choice again and again, and that's what actually starts the conversation of getting to the real roots of the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. I just wonder. I don't have the definition of addiction memorized, but I mean, it's a dependence on something that you created, really. It's not like your
Yeah.
body is going to suffocate if you don't fulfill that need, right? That thing that you've convinced yourself you need. So I think that's where I was
Yeah.
going is like physiologically, you're not addicted to it. It's just, it's something that has become habitual. It's become, I guess, a false narrative in your mind that you need it or you deserve it, or
Yeah.
hey, I'm not murdering people.
Yeah.
So, this isn't that bad, or justification, whatever. There's probably you're the doctor, not me, but
Well, I'm not a
so
doctor, just to be
I know,
clear.
I
I'm not a
know,
doctor. I don't want anybody to be led astray
no, I
here.
know
But
that.
on that note, I think that's a really interesting point. Is yeah, you're right. Like they're watching again and again. They're ultimately choosing to do it. But even if we think about the neuroscience, right, we know that if the brain is changing shape, the brain is developing a dependency, the brain is looking for a certain hit. We know that actually it's more than just, hey, you just made a choice, out of your own persona or character, you made a choice. There's actually some programming there that is maybe not making you do it, but it's making it very hard to resist.
Sure,
And I think those are the
I buy
forces
that.
that people are up against that we don't want to minimize because they're
Yeah,
they're serious.
yeah,
And at the same time, by naming the forces and by knowing what we're actually up against, that's where the solutions are. That's what
yeah.
actually empowers people to do something about their situation.
Yeah, good add on. I appreciate that. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I talking about roots and uprooting, a weed for sure. Are some of those, to name a few? I know there's probably countless, but for guys specifically, and because guys aren't the only people. I mean,
Yep.
newsflash,
Good
right? That
point.
deal with pornography. So, are is it so abandonment, abuse, like things that are from somebody's past, certain wounds, right, that have led them down a path that maybe they feel affirmation, they feel a power or a control. Like, are narcissists more likely to view porn? Like, I'm wondering because they're in control. It's a form of idolatry, I feel like. I mean, we're going
Yeah.
to something because we placed it above everything else. And so tell me, like, who's like the propensity for an addictive behavior as it relates to pornography? Is there a cookie cutter?
Yeah, there's a profile for sure,
Yeah.
and it all centers around one characteristic. I'll be a little bit long-winded here, just to tell a little bit
No,
of a
go for
story
it.
and give
Yeah.
people some context. There's an organization called Exodus Cry. Have you heard of them before, John?
No, no.
Okay, they're a phenomenal organization. They're doing a lot of work in stopping sex trafficking, and they've been
Okay.
very successful. They have some really powerful documentaries. So their first documentary about 11 years ago now, I think it was all about like, hey, look at how lucrative sex trafficking is. Look at how many people are doing it. Look at how bad it is.
Mm,
And afterward, they thought, wait a minute. Um, we never actually thought to even ask like what makes people come and buy sex at these brothels or wherever it might be. So
mm,
they spent the next 5 years studying some of the biggest red light districts in the world, in Thailand and Cambodia and in Amsterdam, trying to just observe like who is coming here, what's the commonality, because they kind of figured maybe we put the cart before the horse. Maybe we don't need to
mm,
try to get rid of sex trafficking. Maybe we need to figure out what's the persona of person who's doing this kind of behavior. Um, and they found that most people didn't really there weren't a lot of commonalities. There weren't a lot of common threads to pull on. You have different stages of life and different histories of abuse and really good childhoods and high income earners and low income earners and Christian and non-Christian and religious and non-religious, and there wasn't anything super unifying except for one quality. And this quality exists in all of our clients that we work with as well. They were exposed to pornography at a young age. That's literally all that, like, again, everyone's story is different, but if you were exposed to porn at a young age, the likelihood of you developing some sort of dependency on it in your adult years is significant. And especially in today's day and age where porn is the three A's, it's affordable, it's accessible, and anonymous. Those three A's make it a very alluring addiction. And because of the effects it's having on the brain and the body, it makes it very, very difficult to quit later on. So I would say that's the typical persona, is they were
mm,
exposed at a young age. I
mm,
think people who the other common qualities are generally we see a lack of emotional immaturity. Um, everyone's got trauma, so I wouldn't even say trauma history is like a distinguishing characteristic. I had a very
Mm,
good childhood, but I still had like trauma. Like I had dynamics growing up that kind of played into
mm,
some of my struggle. And then
mm.
the other quality is just core lies. Is people are really like the enemy has really worked hard to get them to believe lies about themselves and who they are, and that drives it doesn't drive the behavior itself. It's generally what keeps people coming back to the behavior.
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty like elementary that that's the common thread is that those
Crazy, right?
people are all exposed at an early, well, and that's men, right? I mean, the study is mostly men, I would think.
That was with men, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's typically
Yeah.
men that are frequenting these places.
That are buying sex. That's interesting. So is there, so let's say, I mean, this is a lot off the path, but like genetically, women and men, like if you take the two people, a man and a woman, and you take them down the same life trail,
Yeah.
is one going to be more, are we as men most have more proclivities to that addiction for pornography than women? And I mean, if let's say all things are equal, right? You know where I'm going
Yeah.
with that? Does it seem,
Yeah, yeah,
is there a
yeah.
weight there?
The question is getting harder to answer, actually. I think 20 years ago, everyone would have just said, well, obviously men are more likely to have a sex addiction or a porn addiction. You asked a question about narcissists earlier. Narcissists are not more likely to be addicted to pornography, but they are more likely to be sex addicts.
Mm,
And so anyways, there's a whole explanation there. We could go into that. But the reason the question's harder to answer now is because the viewership amongst women is starting to climb.
hmm.
So if you look at kind of the research, 80% of viewers were men back in the day online. Now, I think last year the percentage of women viewing pornography was around 36 or 37%. And there was even a country where more females watched porn than men. So we're seeing a little bit of a shift here. Now, this is specifically for visual pornography.
Okay.
If you follow any of Jordan Peterson's work, the way he would answer this question is he would say men are more likely to watch pornography, women are more likely to read pornography. And
Okay.
so, if we include literary pornography, which tends to be a little bit more alluring for women, although men are also very drawn to literary pornography, um, I honestly, the numbers are not that different, John.
Dang.
It's pretty equal, and it just goes to show you, at its core, pornography addiction is really just an intimacy disorder. That's what everybody's ultimately after. They're after
Hmm.
intimacy, they're after connection,
Hmm.
and that's why healing in community and having other brothers around you if you're a man who are supporting you, who are pursuing freedom just like you are. That's why it's so healing. That's why it's so powerful is because yeah, we're at the end of the day, we're all after meaningful connection with each other. And
Yeah.
when we have that actively in our lives, we're way less likely to give into the lures of the flesh.
Yeah. And I mean, I've you've probably heard it just as much as I have. Sin defined as like meeting a legitimate need in an illegitimate way, right? I mean, all of
Yeah.
these needs and desires and wirings are designed intentionally. God did that, you know, in the union
Yeah.
of marriage,
Yeah.
man and a woman. And so, you know, it's not like we're broken. It's just how it manifests and what we choose to do with it is the broken side, is you know, since Genesis 3, I guess. So man, I have a lot of questions. Still, I mean, I'm up against it too. So talk, I guess we've talked a little bit about some of your coaching. I mean, what would you want us to know about Deep Clean and your company and the work you do? And what are some things that are accessible to us? You know, maybe we're not on the inner circle group like you're talking about, but where could we dip our toe in the water and maybe kind of inch our way towards?
Yeah, I mean, I always recommend people either start with the podcast, which is called The Man Within. We just launched our 1,000th episode, so there's lots of content. We've been really faithful there for several years now. Anything, like if there's something we haven't talked about yet, something you wanted John to ask me, I've probably
Yeah.
talked about it on my podcast before.
Yeah.
So it's called The Man Within. And then the other place is the book. And so my book is called The Last Relapse. It's available everywhere books are sold, and we donate all the money we make from that book. But you can actually get
Wow.
a free copy at thelastrelapsebook.com. And I highly recommend people go there. That's a great way to learn our system and see if it makes sense. And you might be able to learn the system and go pull it off. We actually give a free workbook as well. We really do try to set you up for success. But if you're looking for some community while you do it, that's where the inner circle comes in, and that's where you can get coaching from me. a much more engaged community. It's less than $2 a day, so it's still very affordable. And those would be the different entry points. But generally, I would recommend people start with the podcast or the book, and then if you're like, okay, I think I want the community, I want a little bit of help executing on this, which is a very necessary part of pulling this off, then the inner circle starts to make sense.
Well, I lied. I did have one more question,
All right,
and
Joel.
I'm going to digress, just because I should have asked it a second ago, but you kind of got me triggered on this a little bit in a good way. Like you mentioned something about sex addiction, and are guys likely to group all of this into, well, I'm a sex addict if I'm addicted to porn, or let's just say surface level guy can't stop looking at other women that he finds attractive, but he does nothing with it, right? He's not on
Yeah.
porn, he doesn't cheat, he does what where's the I mean, sex addict just is a guy that goes and finds sex at other places beyond his wife, or help me understand for guys that are maybe thinking a little too much of themselves in that regard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jesus said if you look at a woman with lustful intent,
For
you've
sure,
committed
you've
adultery in
committed.
your heart.
That's right. Yeah.
So the goal should be to eliminate lust. Now, if you find that you lust very infrequently, there's probably other things that the Holy Spirit's prompting you to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, for most guys in the year 2025, when we're recording this, lust is a forefront issue. Most
Hmm.
guys are riddled with lust. And maybe all you do is fantasize. Maybe you don't even watch pornography. Maybe you don't masturbate. You're not sleeping
Right.
around. Maybe all
Right.
you do is fantasize. That's honestly just as bad. And you can actually be diagnosed as a sex addict just from fantasizing about having sex with other people.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily
That's
that
good.
you engage in the act of sex, uncontrollably, although that obviously exists as well. At a root level issue, somebody who's struggling with pornography addiction or sex addiction, the roots can look very similar. You're after connection, there's trauma wounds, there's a lack of emotional maturity there, and there's probably some identity issues. I think that would be prevalent in both. But generally, people who are sex addicts or people that are even paying for sex and buying sex, um, that's it's a more severe
Mm,
layer on the spectrum because the level of risk that you're taking is higher. The
mm,
risk of watching pornography on your phone is serious, and as
mm,
believers, we are to take it serious. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to minimize it.
mm,
Um, but once you pay for something, even if it's still online, that's another level of risk or
mm,
investment.
mm,
Once you go and buy sex, that's a different risk. Once you're having an affair, like the risk level elevates and
mm,
the consequences generally are more serious. But the dangers of pornography addiction are that you actually do all those things, right? You're cheating technically. It's just
mm,
happening digitally, but the consequences don't feel the same because you can hide it. And so that's why a lot of people all that's why 56% of divorces cite pornography use as the primary reason for the divorce.
oh
It's
wow.
actually because generally this is going on, people don't realize it, and then it surfaces, and by the time it surfaces, it's too late.
Yeah,
So yeah, so there's a spectrum there for
it's good.
sure. But pornography addiction is not as far away on the severity scale as people think it
It's
is.
good. Well, I'm glad you said, and I'm glad we went there. I mean, that's a good way to end it because I think it's a twofold benefit, like to your point you just made in that last sentence. But I think too, guys that are like justifying, I'm not manifesting this in an action, so I'm good. I'm sort of, filling that little gap or void in my need column when I check
Yeah,
out, girl visually. So I think that's good. We can't let them off the hook. We can't let us off the hook. I'm going to group me into that because I mean, if guys are honest, all of us have done it or do it, right?
yes,
Noticed visually. So I think there's something to that. Like we need to not dismiss that and minimize that because again, it could be a gateway somewhere else, right? And all of these are related and all of these are gateways in and of themselves to themselves. So,
yeah.
brother, I mean, this was worth the wait, dude. I'm glad you
Great.
made me wait 2 years. This was awesome, man. I enjoyed this. Man, we're gonna have to do it again. I'm gonna put all the links that you mentioned. I was writing down crazy notes here. I'm gonna put all those in there for guys to find you and find some of your resources. But dude,
Yeah.
this has been awesome. You have anything else you want to like give the guys one last thing that's on your heart?
Yeah, I would just say, if you made it this far into the interview, obviously, you learned something from this. Maybe your heart's stirring a little bit. just don't downplay that. Take some action on what you learned today, whether it's going to check out our podcast or download the book, or um, maybe there's a practical thing. Maybe there's somebody that you know you need to talk to about what's going on. I think if you really take your integrity seriously, you really want to become everything God made you to be, and you want to have healthy relationships, this area can't go unaddressed. And you have a prime opportunity right now with all the information you just took in and some of the extra motivation you're feeling to go do something about it. Don't waste that.
It's good. It's good. Audience, he's been the one and only Sathiya Sam. We've been last in line. Be blessed.